Hey everybody, welcome to another Probably Private. I'm Catherine Jarmal, and today we're going to talk about privacy routing. You're probably like, what is privacy routing? Well, AI privacy routing is an idea that I've had for about a year that I wrote a long post about, which I'll put in the description. But it's basically the idea that can we decide what models we use based on privacy constraints? This can be you with your at-home lab. This can be you with your computer, right? So deciding on your computer which models you trust, which models you don't, and using routing software to make those choices for you or building your own. And it can be as big as at an organizational or enterprise level. So we'll kind of talk about all of them, and I'm going to show you a toy example, essentially, which is code you can use to start to get an idea of how you might want to build it yourself. Okay? Okay. Here is an idea of what a privacy router could look like. On one side, we have an engineer with their computer. And then this is maybe more of an enterprise type of setup, but you can also do this at home. There's nothing stopping you from setting up your own enterprise setup. And by the way, I have some videos on local first AI and setting up your own AI lab, like what I run for myself at home. But we first might hit a gateway server or service. If we're running this as an organization, this is probably some sort of distributed microservice that we run, right? That could deal with things like caching of certain requests. It can deal with authentication. It could deal with configurations, things like credentials, other stuff like this, right? So we can keep that separate from our own computer. That means if our computer gets compromised, not all the keys are on our computer, not all the authentication runs on our computer. And this, I think, is a good setup also for agent workflows. Then we hit some sort of guardrails, right? Those guardrails might send the request right back to the user, right? If something went wrong. Or it can go then to essentially our privacy guardrails. And that would mean that we actually set up data classification and we decide based off of what data we're seeing incoming, what is the level of privacy of that data. Now, you've seen on this channel, if you've been following for a while, you've seen me test guardrails for this. I have a video on Llama Guard for this. I have a video on Quen 3 Guard for this. And I also have a video example of building an LLM as a judge, right? So it can be any of these things. It can also be if you actually have metadata at your organization, or if you're willing to sit and put metadata for your local data, you could literally tag the data yourself. Now, this will be very full of effort in the beginning, musam. It will be very, very tiring in the beginning, I promise you, because labeling is not fun and it takes a lot of time. This is why AI companies have the valuations that they do, is they've spent a lot of time labeling and it's no fun. But learning how to label and labeling for yourself is actually, I think, a pretty good way to start to get an idea of what you're actually trying to do. So I would recommend it. I can recommend SpaCy's Prodigy labeler. You can use other labeling software. There's plenty available. But based on either privacy, security, or confidentiality, or some combination of all that, you're basically going to decide this is code red. This only goes to internal models, right? Because it's really that private. You could decide yellow. We're going to try to minimize the data. So we're going to use some minimization techniques like what we see on this channel, Presidio, or other types of pseudonymization. And we're going to use that and then send it, maybe if it doesn't pass the test again of classification, we're going to send it then just to a trusted model, right? And if it's green and we think it's totally a public query, we would post it on the internet, it's no problem. Then we send it to the external model provider, right? At some point in time, a response is collected and it gets sent back to the user or to us if we're building it for ourselves, right? And what I would recommend is communicating. If you're running this on an organizational level, you want to communicate to the users that you might have changed the model path. Why? Why is it important to communicate to the users? There's a lot of security people. I don't really understand. Too much time reading security books, I think. Anyways, there's a lot of security people that will argue with me on this one, and I don't agree with them. So I'm going to tell you my opinion. I think we should communicate it with the users because I think users are intelligent, and if they figure out that you're doing something and they don't want you to do it, they're going to figure out a way around it. And that's how we get shadow IT, what it's called, which basically means people are running the ChatGPT on their phone. They're doing other stuff, right? And they're not actually using the tools that we're providing because they know that we're doing something with privacy and security on them, right? And what we want to encourage is a conversation where if a user is having a bad experience with something that we're building, they come to us and they talk about it, and we can find hopefully some sort of compromise that works for both their needs for their work and what we're trying to do with privacy and security. And if we don't have that conversation and we just like say user is dumb or whatever, like silly things because we're also users, so we're just calling ourselves dumb. Anyways, I don't want to get into a debate, but I think it's important to have a peer-to-peer relationship with users and to really actually communicate with them. So in this case, if I was building this on organizational level, I'd send it back and say, hey, we changed your path because we were concerned about privacy. Please give us thumbs down feedback if this is a poor response or something like this, right? Or come talk to us, right? And so anyways, I think that's the way that we should build these things, especially if we're going to change utility that somebody might have with a service. Or they feel like, hey, usually Claude tells me this and somehow I got a different answer because we used a local model or a different provider instead of Anthropic, right, based on the query. So let's take a look at some code. I have a routing example here for us. I'll put the link to the notebook in the description, and I hope it's big enough. If I make it too much bigger, then some of the cells become hard to read. This basically takes through, it's much simpler because, of course, it's just running in a Jupyter notebook. Please don't run this actually in a Jupyter notebook. It's a toy example, so you can tinker with it here. And then if it works, you can export it as Python, write tests, all of the normal things that you would do if you were actually running this in a real system. But basically, this takes a look via a privacy guardrail model. Then it decides low/medium high. And then it either goes to the external service or it goes through Presidio. And Presidio will try to pseudonymize and redact some information. Then it gets reevaluated. If it was evaluated as high, we reevaluate after pseudonymization. If it's still high, it goes to a local model. If it's not, it goes directly back to the external service and then directly back to the user, right? So I'm going to give you here some options for Olama if you're running on your local machine. Obviously, if you have a lab setup or something like this, or you have other ways that you like running models, please, by all means, modify. Then here, I'm going to show you a little example of how I built a guardrail for response. First, I'm adding timing information. Why am I doing that? Because if I'm running this in some sort of production system or even for myself, I'd like to keep track of how much time is being spent doing guardrails versus actually interacting with the model. And if I see massive deviations there, then either something's going on with my hardware or something's going on with the model, right? And that way I can also build some heuristics that I can use to observe my system and to get an idea if everything's functioning well. This is especially important, obviously, if you're running this distributed across many microservices in many regions at a large-scale organization, okay? Obviously, you wouldn't be using a Jupyter notebook to do, but neither here nor there. Then I'm going to call the guardrail model with the information. I'm going to pull the guardrail model response. I'm going to print it here just for our sanity check, right? And then if it's unsafe, I'm going to log the flags. And no matter what, I'm going to log what amount of time it took. Now I'm using LlamaGuard when we know that S7 is the LlamaGuard response for privacy. So since I'm building a privacy router, that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use an AES key. So I'm going to generate that quickly. I would never normally generate keys like this. It's just an example. Please use a key server, protect your keys, but they're good to use, right? So please use that. Then I have a list of entities to remove. I have different types of entities that I'm going to add here, including pseudonymizing everything with redacted, a phone number with masking, and a passport with an AES key. I'm going to call the pseudonymizer basically here. I'm also timing the pseudonymizer. And the pseudonymizer I'm running with all of the normal things that I set up with Prodigy. Then I'm going to have something that calls the internal service. This is the Mistral model that I'm going to use as kind of the internal example model. And then as the external service, I have my GPU machine running in the other room. Please obviously change this for you, but it uses an OpenAI type of interface because it's running Llama CPP. If you want to learn how to use Llama CPP, check out my video. And there I'm also timing it. So I'm timing both the local model versus the external service. This is important for you to do also for your own setup and get an idea. And then we have basically the main logic. Is it sensitive? Then pseudonymize it. Is it still sensitive? Send it to the internal model. Otherwise, send it to the external model. So we have both the pseudonymization flow and the normal flow where the text has not been altered at all. So we're going to run that. And here I'm going to try to send it to Quen 3.635 billion, which is running on that machine. And I'm going to say deliver a sandwich to an address. If you get lost, call this number. It's going to be running. It's loading the models for the first time. So it's taking a little bit of time. It's unsafe in the beginning. Then it goes through Presidio. Presidio has a lot of logging. Then we can see the Presidio logged that. Now it's marked as safe and now went to the actual server. We can look at the thing. Quen is like, hey, I can't deliver, but here's some cool stuff. Unfortunately, it got the original. There's a bug in my code. Important. Check your code. Test your code. Don't test in a Jupyter notebook. Okay, this time we definitely sent the new text because we found our bug. And yeah, here's our new text that got sent. And yeah, took 2 seconds. So let me also try this one. So this one should be marked safe. It is marked safe. It gets responded to immediately. And we can read about quantum physics if we want to via an LLM. So what I want you to do, if you're still watching, is I want you to take this notebook, play around with it, or if you're already using a routing server or service, I want you to take a look and see if you can set up guardrails as a part of your flow. And you can use any of the guardrail models we've talked about. You can also use the LLM as a judge. Of course, that will add latency. But I want you to tinker around with your local setup and see, does any of this work for you? And if so, do you actually want to make decisions on your model choice based on privacy? I would argue, yes, you should. And I would argue this because, we all know that you can't control what the data is that leaves your computer. And that AI companies, of course, are incentivized to collect a lot of data and make data that looks realistic. And not all companies are going to have the same amount of investment in privacy. And so I just want you to be a critical consumer. I know you already are. That's why you're watching this channel. But I want you to think about your data as a vote for your values and as a vote for what you believe AI should be. And for that reason, I really want you to decide, you can use the newest model from Service X, Yes, that's something that you can do, but maybe you should be concerned about your privacy with service X, and therefore you should take whatever measures that you can, including potentially routing to other models or to using local models for things that are really sensitive, as one way that you can vote with your data, right? So just want you to think about that. I'd be really excited to hear what you think in the comments, what questions you have, and I will see you next week.